Once upon a time, in a small village filled with whispers of hope and struggles, there lived a young girl named Amaka. She was the first child of the Okafor family, a family well known not for riches but for their good name and strong values. The Okafors were not rich, but they were rich in kindness, laughter, and love. Amaka's father, Papa Okafor, was a struggling farmer. He would wake up at the crack of dawn, armed with nothing but his hoe and faith, to till the stubborn soil of their little farm. The harvests were meager, but his spirit was strong. Her mother, Mema Okafor, was a woman of wisdom and warmth. She ran a small akara stand by the roadside, her smile brighter than the sizzling oil that fried her snacks. Despite their poverty, the Okafor family held their heads high. Money can come and go, Mema Okafor would always say, but character stays forever. Let us never trade our good name for anything. Amaka, being the first child, carried the weight of her family's struggles on her young shoulders. At just 14, she helped on the farm, assisted her mother at the akara stand, and tutored her younger siblings, Chike and Ada, under the dim glow of their kerosene lamp. She was the glue holding them all together. But even with all the hardships, Amaka was a dreamer. She believed in a better tomorrow. While her siblings played, she would sit under the ancient mango tree in their compound, her eyes fixed on the stars. One day, she whispered to herself, "I'll change our story. I don't know how, but I will." Life in the Okafor household was tough but filled with lessons. Mama Okafor made sure of that. She often gathered her children and told them tales of heroes who triumphed not because they were the strongest but because they were the kindest and most courageous. "Never envy the rich," she'd say. "Envy the kind. True wealth is in how you treat people." Amaka absorbed these teachings like a sponge. Her classmates teased her for wearing torn dresses and rubber slippers to school, but she never let it break her spirit. Instead, she found joy in small things: a borrowed storybook, the smell of rain, the laughter of her siblings. She was a young girl with a poor pocket but a rich heart. One fateful day, Mema Okafor received an invitation to her cousin's wedding in a nearby town. It was a rare moment of celebration for the family. Amaka and her siblings stayed home as their parents set off early that morning in a borrowed car. "Take care of the house," Mema Okafor called out, waving from the window. "And remember, kindness is our greatest treasure." But the joy of the day soon turned into a nightmare. Hours passed, and then came the news that would shatter their world. Papa and Mema Okafor had been in a car accident on their way back from the wedding. The news of her parents' accident broke Amaka completely. She sat under the mango tree where she once dreamed of changing her family's story, her shoulders trembling as she held her younger siblings close. Chike, only 10, and Ada, just 7, clung to her like fragile leaves in a storm, their tears soaking her tattered blouse. Life as they knew it had crumbled, leaving only pain and unanswered questions. After the burial, the small crowd that had gathered to console them slowly disappeared. Amaka's uncle, who had promised to take care of them, vanished too. Days turned into weeks, and it became clear that they were on their own. "We will survive," Amaka whispered to herself, her voice trembling but determined. "We will survive for Mema and Papa." Mema's akara stand became their only lifeline. At just 14, Amaka stepped into her mother's shoes, though they were far too big for her young feet. By 4 a.m. each morning, she was already awake, grinding beans, heating oil, and frying akara. The sizzle of the oil became her new morning song, and the smoke from the frying pan painted her small face with streaks of determination. By 8:30 a.m., she would close the stand, count her small earnings, bathe her siblings, and send them off to school. She barely had time to wash herself before rushing out. By 9 a.m., she was in her classroom, panting and sweaty, always greeted by the mocking laughter of her classmates. "Ah, Principal Amaka is here," they teased, nicknaming her the principal because of her consistent lateness. Amaka took the teasing in stride, but her lateness didn't escape the sharp eyes of her teacher, Mrs. Agbo. "Amaka Okafor," the stern woman bellowed one morning, as Amaka tiptoed into the classroom yet again. "Come to the front." Amaka's heart sank. She dropped her bag and walked to the front, her head bowed low. "You think this school is your house? Always coming late like you own the place. Kneel down and raise your hands. Let's see if that will teach you some respect for time." Mrs. Agbo snapped, her voice as sharp as her cane. Amaka obeyed, her hands trembling as she raised them. The other students giggled, but Amaka's mind wasn't even in the classroom. She was thinking about her siblings, whether they'd eaten lunch, whether Chike had remembered to lock the door, whether Ada's shoes were falling apart again. The minutes dragged on, and her arms ached, but Amaka didn't cry. She had learned to hold her tears, to stay strong, because her siblings depended on her. That day, when Amaka got home from school, her heart sank as she found Chike sitting on the floor, his face buried in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. His tears fell onto the cracked cement floor, each drop stabbing at Amaka's already heavy heart. "Chike, what happened?" she asked, rushing to his side. Through hiccups and sniffles, Chike looked up, his eyes red and puffy. "They beat me and sent me out of school because I haven't paid my fees," he said, his voice trembling. Amaka's chest tightened. She had barely managed to pay Ada's fees and half of her own. The Akara business hadn't been bringing in much lately, and now, this. She held Chike close, stroking his head gently. "Don't cry, Chike. I'll find a way. I promise." That afternoon, after putting her siblings to rest and calming her own racing mind, Amaka made a decision. She reached into the small wooden box where she kept her savings, the jingling coins sounding louder than usual in the silence of their small room. She counted the money carefully, just enough to buy a bag of pure water sachets. "This will have to do," she whispered to herself, tying the scarf on her head tightly. She walked briskly to the local vendor and bought the bag of pure water, her heart pounding with both fear and determination. By the time the sun began to set, Amaka was standing on one of Lagos' busiest traffic roads, weaving through cars and buses, shouting at the top of her voice. "Pure water. Buy pure water. Ice cold, pure water." The humid air clung to her skin as she hustled, dodging impatient drivers and relentless honking. The work was exhausting, but every time she felt like giving up, she reminded herself of Chike's tear-streaked face and Ada's innocent smile. Day after day, Amaka juggled her mother's Akara business in the early mornings and her pure water hustle in the afternoons. She barely slept, her small hands roughened by the weight of survival. Yet, she never complained. She knew she had to do whatever it took to keep her family afloat. 2 years passed like a whirlwind, but for Amaka, every day felt like a battle. From selling Akara in the morning to hawking pure water in the traffic, she worked tirelessly. Her hard work, however, began to bear fruit. The Akara business had grown. The small roadside stand that used to sell a few pieces a day now had a line of customers waiting even before she set up. One of her most loyal customers was Obinna, a young man in his late 20s. Obinna worked nearby as a delivery driver, and he always stopped by Amaka's stand for his morning breakfast. He watched her closely, not with judgment, but with admiration. Despite her struggles, Amaka never lost her spark. She greeted every customer with a smile, handled the rush with grace, and never once complained about her hardships. One morning, as Amaka scrambled to serve customers, her hands moving like they had a mind of their own, Obinna noticed her struggling to keep up. The line grew longer, and some customers began grumbling. He stepped forward and said, "Amaka, let me help you." Amaka paused, her face glistening with sweat, and looked at him. "Help me?" "But why?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. Obinna shrugged, a kind smile spreading across his face. "You're doing so much already. I can see you need the help. Just show me what to do." Reluctantly, Amaka agreed, and Obinna rolled up his sleeves. With his help, the crowd moved faster, and by midday, they had served everyone without losing a single customer. As they packed up, Amaka turned to him and said softly, "Thank you, Obinna. I didn't think anyone would care enough to help." Obinna chuckled. "You're doing great, Amaka. But even the strongest people need a little help sometimes." From that day, Obinna began stopping by more often, not just as a customer but as a helper. He noticed how carefully Amaka managed her money and her time, balancing her growing business with her studies. "You're amazing. You know that," he said one afternoon while they packed up for the day. "Most people would have given up by now. But look at you." Amaka blushed, feeling a warmth she hadn't known in years. "I don't have a choice," she said simply. "My siblings are counting on me." Obinna started offering advice on how to improve the business. "You could add puff puff to your menu," he suggested one day. "People love variety, especially in this area." Another time, he taught her how to negotiate with suppliers to save more money. Slowly, the bond between them deepened. They found themselves talking about life, dreams, and even their pasts. For Amaka, Obinna became more than a helper. He became a friend, a source of comfort in a chaotic world. But as they grew closer, people began to notice. Some customers teased them, while others whispered, questioning Obinna's intentions. Amaka tried to ignore it, but she couldn't help feeling a little nervous. Back in school, Amaka stayed true to her focus. She had a dream, and no matter the odds stacked against her, she was determined to make it come true. It was time for her to write her West African examination, and she poured herself into her studies with everything she had. Every night, after a long day of juggling school and business, she sat at her small wooden table under the flickering lantern light, flipping through textbooks and solving past questions. Despite her exhaustion, she still found time to help Chaik and Ada with their homework. Chaik, no, that's not how you solve it. See, if you divide this number first, then multiply by the other one, you'll get the answer, she explained patiently, guiding him through his math problems. Chaik marveled at his sister. Despite her young age, Amaka had grown into a strong pillar for their family, taking on responsibilities far beyond her years. Her Akara business was thriving, thanks to her hard work and Obinna's advice. Customers now came from far and wide, drawn not just by the taste of her food but also by her warm personality. At just 18, Amaka was already carrying the weight of a family on her shoulders. She managed their home, paid for her siblings' school fees, and was even saving for her own future. But she knew she couldn't do it all alone anymore. One evening, she sat Chaik down and said, "Chaik, you're old enough to help me now. I need you to handle the Akara stand when I'm not around. I have to focus on my exams, and I can't be there all the time." Chaik nodded eagerly. "Don't worry, Amaka. I'll do my best," he said, his eyes shining with determination. Amaka trained him carefully, teaching him how to grind the beans, fry the Akara to perfection, and handle customers. By the time her exams began, Chaik was already running the stand like a pro, allowing Amaka to focus on her studies. But life wasn't done testing her yet. One day, Obinna came to her, his face pale and his eyes filled with tears. "Amaka, please, I need your help," he said, his voice breaking. "My mother is very sick, and the hospital won't treat her unless I pay a deposit. I don't know who else to turn to." Amaka's heart ached for him. She had grown close to Obinna over the years, and the thought of his mother's suffering was unbearable. Without hesitation, she handed him 45,000 naira, almost all the money she had saved. "Take it, Obinna. Go and take care of your mother," she said softly. Obinna held her hands tightly, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you, Amaka. You don't know what this means to me." Despite the financial setback, Amaka stayed focused. She wrote her exams with confidence, putting every ounce of effort into her answers. Her teachers, who once doubted her because of her lateness, marveled at her determination. Finally, the day came when the exams were over. Amaka walked out of the hall with a sense of relief and pride. She had given it her all. Now, she only had to wait for the results. As she returned home, she looked around at the bustling Akara stand, where Chaik was expertly handling customers. Ada ran up to her, beaming. "Auntie Amaka, how was your exam?" "It was good," Amaka said, smiling. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream. She had graduated from secondary school and was ready to take on the next challenge, her jam exams. Amaka's life was filled with a mix of challenges and small victories. Chaik, now in SS1 and on his way to SS2, had made her immensely proud. When he came home one day, clutching his report card and grinning from ear to ear, Amaka couldn't hold back her tears. "First position again," she exclaimed, looking at the card. Chaik nodded proudly. "Yes, Auntie Amaka. I worked hard just like you taught me." Amaka hugged him tightly. "You're making me so proud, Chaik. You and Ada both. Mama and Papa will be smiling from heaven." Ada, too, was doing well, always helping Amaka around the house and in the business when needed. The siblings were growing into responsible and disciplined young people, a testament to Amaka's sacrifices and the values instilled by their late parents. Meanwhile, Amaka's relationship with Obinna grew stronger, or so she thought. Obinna continued to be a constant presence in her life, offering sweet words and seemingly endless support. But along with his love came something else, his continuous requests for money. "Amaka, my bike needs repair." Or "Amaka, I need to pay for my mother's medication again." "Amaka, blinded by her affection, gave freely, believing that Obinna truly cared for her. She justified his behavior, thinking, he's just struggling like me. If I can help, why not? But then came the news that turned her life around. She had passed her JAM exams with flying colors and secured admission to Yabatech University in Yaba, Lagos. The moment felt surreal, like a dream come true. Finally, a chance to secure my future, she thought, tears of joy streaming down her face. She couldn't wait to share the news with Obinna. He'll be so proud of me, she whispered to herself as she made her way to his house. But when she arrived, the sight that greeted her stopped her in her tracks. Sitting in Obinna's small living room was a young woman cradling a child, no more than 3 years old. The woman looked up and smiled awkwardly at Amaka. "Who is this, Obinna?" Amaka asked, her voice trembling. Obinna's face went pale. He stammered, unable to find the right words. But the woman spoke up. "I'm his wife, and this is our son." The room seemed to spin around Amaka. Her heart pounded in her chest as the truth unraveled. Obinna had always been married. He wasn't the man she thought he was. He had only been drawn to her because of her success with the Akara business, seeing her as an opportunity to ease his financial struggles. Amaka stood there, stunned. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her heart shattered but her resolve stronger than ever. From that moment, Amaka made a decision. No more distractions. No more letting people take advantage of me. It's time to focus on myself and my future. At Yabatech, Amaka poured all her energy into her studies. She worked harder than ever, taking on part-time jobs to support herself and her siblings. Her determination didn't go unnoticed. By her 3rd year, she was recognized for her exceptional performance in her department. During the award ceremony, as she walked up to the stage to receive her plaque, the applause echoed in her ears like a sweet melody. She stood tall, her face glowing with pride and a sense of accomplishment. Amaka's rise to success was nothing short of extraordinary. After graduating with honors, her brilliance and work ethic caught the attention of a major company on Lagos Island during her internship. To her surprise, they didn't just want her back. They wanted her as the manager of their Lagos headquarters. She couldn't believe it. With the position came an official car, a luxurious office, and benefits she had only dreamed of. From selling Akara to managing a company, she thought with pride, but also with gratitude for the journey that shaped her. With her new position, Amaka upgraded her siblings' lives. Chike, now out of secondary school and preparing for JAM, often smiled and said, "Auntie Amaka, you've made me believe anything is possible." Ada, still in school, had everything she needed to excel. The 3 siblings lived in comfort now, far removed from their days of struggling to make ends meet. Amaka's investments also flourished. She had a keen eye for opportunity, turning her growing wealth into a solid empire. It wasn't long before everyone wanted to be associated with her. But with success came a new challenge, finding true love. Men lined up for Amaka, but as time passed, it became clear that most were more interested in her bank account than her heart. "Is there no man out there who will love me for who I am?" she often wondered. Then came Chuka. He wasn't like the others, or so she thought. He charmed her with his humor, his compliments, and his seemingly genuine interest in her life. For 6 months, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the one. But one evening, as she sat in her sleek car outside his apartment, waiting to surprise him with dinner, she overheard a conversation that crushed her. Chuka was on the phone, laughing with someone about how he'd hit the jackpot. "This babe doesn't even know what she has," he said. "Amaka is my ticket to the big life, bro. Once we marry, I'm set for life." Amaka froze. Her hands trembled as she gripped the steering wheel. That night, tears streamed down her face as she drove home. She locked herself in her room and cried out loud. "Why, God? Why does nobody see me for who I am? What did I do to deserve this?" She was 28 now, and her clock seemed to tick louder with each passing day. Friends and relatives often asked, "Amaka, when will you settle down? You're successful, yes, but a woman's life is complete with a husband." The pressure was mounting. But Amaka, being the sharp woman she was, made a bold decision. "If my wealth is the problem, then I'll take it out of the equation." She decided to act poor. Maybe, just maybe, if she stripped away all the glitz and glamour, she could find someone who truly valued her for her heart, not her fortune. With that plan in mind, she packed a small bag, left behind her official car, and rented a modest one-room apartment in a humble part of town. The designer clothes, jewelry, and corporate persona were replaced with simple outfits and a down-to-earth demeanor. In the bustling streets of Gown Estate, Igbita, lived Emeka, a young man whose dreams were larger than the modest mechanic workshop he ran. A graduate with honors, he had envisioned a life where his brilliance would take him to great heights. But the harsh reality of the country's unemployment crisis left him fixing cars instead of building his career. Though it wasn't what he had hoped for, Emeka worked tirelessly, praying each day for a breakthrough. One day, he often told himself, "God will answer me. I just need to keep pushing." Not everyone was willing to wait for that day. Demilla, his girlfriend of 3 years, had grown tired of their struggling relationship. A 24-year-old beauty with a love for nightlife and the spotlight, Demilla had dreams of her own, dreams that didn't involve managing with a man who couldn't afford her lifestyle. One evening, she confronted Emeka. "Look, Emeka, I can't do this anymore. I need more than just hope and prayers. I need someone who can take care of me, not someone fixing cars in a dirty workshop." Her words stung, but Emeka didn't try to stop her as she walked out of his life. "If she can't see the man I'm becoming, then maybe she's not meant to be with me," he whispered to himself, though the ache in his chest told a different story. Meanwhile, on the other side of Igbita, Amaka was settling into her new, modest lifestyle. She had rented a small room in a compound filled with a mix of vibrant tenants and their everyday hustle. Gone were her flashy clothes and polished corporate look. Now, she dressed in simple outfits that helped her blend into her surroundings. She often moved around the compound, observing the lives of her new neighbors, but kept to herself. Her phone was her companion, always in her hand as she stayed updated with the outside world or watched motivational videos to keep her spirits high. That fateful afternoon, Amaka was deep in thought, scrolling through her phone as she walked towards the shared toilet in the compound. She barely noticed someone stepping out from another corner until, bam, she bumped into a tall, lean man with a faint scent of engine oil lingering on his clothes. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She looked up, startled and a little annoyed, only to meet Emeka's apologetic face. "Ah, sorry, Emeka said quickly, bending down to pick up her phone. Amaka dusted off her dress, her eyes narrowing as she took a good look at him. "You know Daylook Road?" she asked, trying to mask her irritation. "No vex," Emeka said, handing her the phone. "I was rushing to collect something inside." Amaka muttered under her breath, shook her head, and walked off towards the toilet, leaving Emeka standing there, watching her retreating figure. There was something about her demeanor, strong, focused, and a little intimidating, that piqued his curiosity. He smiled to himself. Who be that one? He wondered as he turned to leave. Little did either of them know that this seemingly ordinary bump would set the stage for something neither of them expected. One quiet evening, Amaka was cooking a simple meal in her small kitchen when she realized she had no salt. Frustrated but determined to finish her food, she thought of asking her neighbor, Emeka, for help. She hesitated for a moment, but hunger won. Amaka knocked softly on Emeka's door. A moment later, he appeared, wiping his hands with a piece of cloth, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Hi, Amaka. How can I help you?" he asked warmly. "Please, Emeka. I ran out of salt. Can you spare me a little?" she asked shyly. Emeka smiled and went back into his room, returning with a small container of salt. "Take as much as you need. Don't worry," he said. Amaka smiled. "Thank you so much, Emeka. I'll return this when I'm done." From that small act of kindness, their bond began to grow. Over time, Emeka and Amaka became closer. Whenever Emeka returned from his mechanic workshop, he would sometimes bring small gifts for Amaka, things like fruits or snacks he thought she might like. "I saw these on my way back and thought you'd enjoy them," he would say with a grin. Amaka appreciated his thoughtfulness and began to help Emeka in ways she knew best. She noticed that Emeka was hardworking but struggled to manage his finances. She gently offered him advice, teaching him how to save even with the little he earned. "Emeka," she said one day, "it's not about how much you make but how you manage it. Let's write down your expenses and see where you can save." To his surprise, her suggestions worked. Slowly but surely, Emeka started saving money. He felt a new sense of pride and often told his friends about Amaka. "This girl is something else," he would say. "She's not just beautiful, She's wise and caring too. One day, Emeka faced a difficult problem at work that seemed to need money to solve. He hesitated but decided to share it with Amaka. Instead of offering him money, Amaka sat with him and listened carefully. Then she said, "Emeka, let's think of other ways to solve this. Money is not always the answer. Sometimes, the right idea can open more doors than cash." They discussed different strategies, and with Amaka's suggestions, Emeka found a solution that didn't cost him a single naira. He was amazed at how her advice worked and admired her even more for her wisdom and practicality. Meanwhile, Amaka's younger brother, Chike, was thriving. He had been offered admission to study law at the University of Lagos. Amaka couldn't hide her joy. "I'm so proud of you, Chike," she told him, hugging him tightly. "Keep working hard, and you'll achieve great things." As the months passed, Emeka's life began to change for the better. With Amaka's guidance and encouragement, he became more organized and confident in his work. His savings grew, and he even started thinking of expanding his mechanic business. In just 16 months, Emeka had risen to a new level in life, and he knew deep in his heart that Amaka was the reason for his growth. He couldn't help but feel grateful for the day she had knocked on his door asking for salt. But life always has its surprises, and their journey together was just beginning. One sunny afternoon, Emeka arrived at Amaka's door with an unusual excitement in his step. He held a small, neatly wrapped box in his hand, his heart racing with anticipation. Amaka welcomed him in, her cheerful smile lighting up the room as usual. After a bit of laughter and shared stories of their day, Emeka suddenly dropped to one knee. Amaka froze, her heart pounding. "Amaka," Emeka began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You are not just a blessing in my life. You're my reason to dream bigger, to work harder, and to believe in a future brighter than I ever imagined. Will you do me the honor of being my wife?" Tears welled up in Amaka's eyes. She couldn't believe how far they had come together, how much they had grown. She nodded through her tears and whispered, "Yes, Emeka, I will." The room filled with joy as they embraced, their love sealing a bond that had been tested and strengthened over time. Later that evening, as they sat together enjoying a quiet moment, Amaka decided it was time for Emeka to know the truth. "Emeka," she started, holding his hand, "there's something I've been keeping from you. It's not out of distrust, but because I needed to find someone who truly loved me for who I am, not for what I have." Emeka looked at her curiously but didn't interrupt. Amaka took a deep breath. "I come from wealth, Emeka, a wealth I earned through hard work, sweat, and tears. I'm the manager of a big company, and I've built a life many dream of. But for a long time, I've been surrounded by people who only saw my money, not my heart. That's why I chose to live humbly here, to find someone genuine, someone like you." Emeka's eyes widened in shock, but his grip on her hand tightened. "Amaka," he said, "none of that changes how I feel about you. If anything, it makes me admire you even more. You've built so much and still stayed so humble. I love you for who you are, not for what you have." Damila's world turned upside down when she discovered she was pregnant. The man she had been dating, a wealthy businessman, coldly denied responsibility. "Do you think I'd settle for someone like you?" he sneered. "You're not the kind of woman I'd marry. I want a decent, responsible lady, not someone who smokes in clubs and runs after material things." His words cut deep, leaving Damila shattered. She had been chasing a life of glitz and glamour, thinking it would bring her happiness. Now, she was left to face her reality alone. Even her so-called friends, who had once cheered her on, turned their backs on her, avoiding her calls and ignoring her cries for help. In her despair, Damila decided to seek out Emeka, the man she had left behind when life seemed brighter elsewhere. But when she arrived at his shop, she was met with a heartwarming sight. Emeka was happily married to Amaka. She watched from a distance as Amaka, now heavily pregnant, brought lunch to her husband, their laughter filling the air. The love between them was unshakable, a bond built on trust, patience, and shared struggles. Damila's heart sank further. She realized she had let go of a man who had genuinely loved her for who she was, not for what she could offer. Her choices had led her to a lonely place, and now, even the love she had taken for granted was out of reach. Meanwhile, Obinna, once charming and full of sweet promises, was living a harsh reality. After his wife discovered he could no longer provide the luxury she desired, she packed her bags and left him for another wealthy man. Obinna sat alone in the small apartment he could barely afford, reflecting on his actions. He had chased after riches and used people like Amaka to satisfy his selfish needs, only to end up with nothing. Amaka and Emeka's love continued to flourish. Their first child, a beautiful baby boy, was born, bringing even more joy into their lives. Together, they expanded Emeka's mechanic business into a thriving enterprise and started a foundation to support young people from underprivileged backgrounds. Amaka's siblings also blossomed under her care. Chike, now a lawyer, gave his first speech at the foundation, thanking his sister for her sacrifices. Ada, excelling in school, was on her way to becoming a doctor. Amaka stood proud, knowing that the struggle she endured had shaped her into the woman she was today. The choices we make today shape the future we live tomorrow. Damila and Obinna's stories remind us that greed and selfishness lead to emptiness, while hard work, humility, and genuine love create lasting joy. True wealth is not measured by material possessions but by the love, respect, and kindness we share. Don't despise humble beginnings. Amaka and Emeka's journey shows that even from the lowest points, greatness can rise. Patience and trust are the foundations of lasting relationships. The moral of their story? Your background doesn't determine your destiny. With hard work, faith, and the right people by your side, you can rise above any challenge. What do you think of this powerful story? Did it touch your heart? Do you have suggestions for other tales you'd love to hear? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Tales by Foxy for more inspiring and heartfelt tales. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. Together, let's celebrate life's lessons and keep these stories alive.
Hi.